Alright, what's the bullshit today?
So as to avoid getting caught will be something I will never forget. You made it to the end. You're a lucky beast. I'll cut you a deal. Smash like and subscribe for more curated content, bro. It's free. What's your best file me? My freaking day moment from work. I was 17 and working part-time at a fast food restaurant. Someone recommends restaurant. Shat in the urinal.
Trying to communicate.
The manager came out and told me to clean it. I refused. She
It is
threatened to
powerful
fire me. To which I laughed in her face and told her you can clean it yourself.
Shit, I forgot to go out of creative lesson we were playing. Sorry guys.
Needless to say, I wasn't fired and I didn't clean my
I didn't do this. You can look at the last stream. I was in the same place.
For a newspaper.
Let's see what it's trying to give me.
Placing stories and pictures where they need to be.
Frostwalker, eh?
Quoting and sorting everything. I was a one-man team.
It seems like they gave me a enchanted bottle to enchant my boots, I guess.
Possible deadlines and berated me for not meeting them. One day the boss tells me to fully put a paper done by the end of the day. Gave me no warning. I had no articles from the journalists and no photos from photographers. It was my job to collect it all from everyone and he wants me to do it in a single day? I told him no. If he wants it done, he has to give me more time. He tells me if I don't have it done by the end of the day I'm fired. I tell him that this paper can't function without me. He tells me I need to take the day off and cool my temper and that he'll do my job for me. Get a call an hour after I get home that he needs me to come in and do it and I can have as much time as I need. Promptly quit on that butthole. Frick your crappy newspaper. Best one. Only took an hour of having to do your job to make them say frick this.
Too expensive.
Worked a job where I was the only one who knows how to take apart, clean, fix, and put all the equipment back together and do the weekly and monthly maintenance. Had a boss tell me one day that I was doing a poor job and not doing enough and that anyone could do it. If I didn't step up I would be fired or else as they had manuals for each piece of equipment. So that night I took apart all the equipment, weekly and monthly stuff too, cleaned them, and then just left it apart for them to figure out that morning. Then I turned off my phone after getting home for the entire day as I had the day off. When I turned it back on the next day I saw that I had initially received angry texts ordering me to return and put everything back together. This lasted an hour. Then texts saying I risked being fired. Then texts begging me to return. Then more texts trying to compromise with OT. Then an apology before nothing else for the rest of the day other than that the head boss wanted to see me as soon as I came in the next day. Came in the next day and over half the stuff was still not put together and what had been put together was put together haphazardly and would need to be taken out again then put back incorrectly. Was immediately asked to be seen by my boss and their boss to explain myself the moment I was seen entering. Once in the office I told them that if they weren't there to apologize then just fire me then and there or drop it and let me put all the stuff back together. They looked at each other and then told me that I could get back to work. Boss never called me lazy again. Should have asked for a raise too long. I once called in sick to my part-time job at Club Monaco. My manager told me that if I couldn't find anyone to cover my shift, I was going to be fired. So I FaceTimed her from the air and had the doctor explain to her that I needed an MRI cause they wanted to make sure I didn't have a brain tumor. Wouldn't be shocked if that shitbag manager still fired you. When I was 17 I worked a summer holiday job at Pizza Hut. I had transferred to my hometown restaurant from my university town restaurant. I was there for 5 weeks and hadn't been paid yet. The dickhead boss claimed it was because I gave him the wrong employee number. I hadn't. Anyway, after 5 weeks of no pay I rang him on New Year's Eve, i.e. busiest night of the summer, and said I wasn't coming to work because I wasn't a volunteer and I wasn't going to work for free. He told me if I didn't go to work I may as well not come back as I would be fired. I didn't go to work and had a fun New Year's instead. Then a few days later I called the employment tribunal, I'm in New Zealand, and told them what had happened. They called my dickhead boss. He then called me, offered me my job back and was nice as pie for the rest of the summer. You have to be a real dickhead boss to think that you can threaten someone that you've yet to pay for more than a month of labor. Especially when there's a whole government department just waiting for someone to let them know that their employer is withholding their wages and is only a phone call away. I worked at an unspecified telecom a few years ago. I was a senior manager in charge of programming, third-level support, and production support. A business unit bullied through code changes, made by the business side through a side deal with a legacy programmer in the data center, circumventing my team, QA and production testing. That just had to get implemented immediately without going through any testing at all. I refused. The CIO overruled me. 72 hours later, phone activations had ground to a halt. Customers nationwide were screaming, and the CIO called phone conference after phone conference demanding timelines for when I was going to get this crap fixed. He kept screaming to have members of my team to get on the phone and explain themselves to him. I refused. Finally, I snapped and told him that if he wanted me to fix his mistake, I would need to get off the freaking phone, go work with my teams. And the only reason they hadn't walked out yet was that I was keeping him off their asses. But we would all happily go together. 24-ish hours later, QA and my team had the bulls cleaned up and fixed for a clean rollout. This was all to avoid a 24-hour delay for QA production testing. I wish I could say that was the only worst time. Thanks for protecting your team. I have mad respect for leads who do that. There's enough madness for everyone to deal with without the unnecessary wrath of management in the mix. Husband was having his gallbladder taken out and was having complications before surgery. I needed to leave early from work for about 2 hours and my boss threw a fit stating I couldn't leave. I told her I had 300 hours of sick time I can use for myself and my husband, and if she wanted to push I'd take all of it at once, leaving no one but her to do my job. She said she'd fire me if I tried. I just looked at her and said, I have to go, I'll send you my DR's note. I wasn't fired. I was actually awarded that year for job performance. Over the first year I worked there, I essentially took over most of the tasks in my department which were previously held by other departments and was done badly because of it. This led to a massive increase in productivity. I then found out I was paid significantly less than what others were making and others in my position across the industry were making. So I go to my boss and tell them I had done all this work increasing productivity and I would like to discuss a raise. They said no. So I worked there for another year, asking for a raise every now and again until I was offered a job that paid double. It didn't start for a couple months, so I held on to that job until I was set to submit my 2 weeks. I asked for a raise again, thinking what the heck, why not? My boss goes off, tells me I won't get a raise and says some very colorful things about it. It culminated with her telling me, if you don't like your pay, maybe we should evaluate your future at this company, to which I replied, already have. I took another job and this was your last chance to offer me what I deserve. I quit and walked out of that office. Friend told me that my sudden departure caused a massive backup of work that ended with my manager being fired for it. God, I can only imagine how awesome it must feel for your boss to say maybe you should evaluate your future here and to be able to say to their face, already have. Bye. Worked for Radio Shack and always butted heads with the district manager. He wanted me to use these ridiculous sales techniques that might work in a big city but were really pushy. The year he became our DM, I won a contest for best salesman in the whole company, out of about 14,000 employees, and I did it without being pushy and forcing stuff on people. He still tried to get me to use these ridiculous techniques each month when he would visit. But after I won the contest, I stopped sugarcoating it and would flat out tell him that's stupid. I'm not going to do it that way. Being pushy is the best way to talk yourself out of a sale. As a customer, when I am approached by those types, I will almost always walk away, even if I need what they are selling. I was a summer teacher at one of those careers at prep school that hired US college students for a summer, and then promptly worked them to death. Although, I will admit the pay was pretty good. We taught 8:30 a.m. through 5:30 p.m. with an hour lunch. We had homework to grade every evening, prep work, etc. Well, they were mainly focused on teaching English, but I was a math and physics major, so they had me teaching sat math and college prep physics. No problem. Then they decided since I studied physics, I should also teach their chemistry class. I tried to tell them I didn't know much chemistry, but they insisted, so I worked my butt off. refreshing myself on all of the stuff before I taught it, while still teaching another math and physics class.
Okay, I'm fucking out
And
of
one day in the middle of this I got legitimately sick. I called in the night before, per the rules, and told them I couldn't come in. I took one day off, sleeping in my apartment, and then dragged myself in the next day. When I show up, they pull me aside and say, "So how do you plan on making up the time for the classes you've missed?" Excuse me, well, we didn't have anyone to teach your classes, so all the kids are behind now. You have to make up the time. We figured you could just extend your morning class an hour for the first week, aka teach over lunch, and your afternoon class could then start an hour early for the next week. Why didn't you have a sub teach my class? Then they screwed up. They said we don't have a sub. Well then, no, I'm not going to skip my lunch because of your guys' poor planning. We'll fire you, and then you won't get your plane ticket. Remember, they replied. Go ahead. First, I followed the rules and gave you notice I was going to be out. Second, you just told me you don't have a sub for my classes. That means if I leave, you're going to lose all of those students that I'm teaching. That will cost you a lot more than the planet ticket will cost me. Was 19 and working a minimum wage job in a shop. Owner sold the business to a new guy who had never worked in the industry and knew nothing about any of it. His first day in charge, he decides I look unprofessional and should be wearing a uniform. Then he decides the uniform should include a fluorescent cap with my name embroidered on it. I told him I wouldn't have taken this job if it had included wearing a fluorescent cap with my name embroidered on it, but he tells me it's going to be mandatory from now on. So I will be sacked if I don't wear it. Fine by me. I'll be leaving for any other job which pays exactly the same but doesn't make me wear a ridiculous hat, and I'll take with me my good relationships with all our contractors and suppliers, and my knowledge of how the frick all your equipment actually works. Reader, he didn't fire me, nor was I presented with a spiffy new hat when all the other employees got theirs. I did leave about 2 weeks later though, as he was an insufferable twat face with a real anger issue, and was impossible to work with. Was very tempted to pop in and visit wearing a cap with my name on, but I didn't want him to die from rage. I'm a speech therapist. I work in a skilled nursing facility. For the most part, they all suck. This is no exception. But the place I used to work, the boss was a scumbag, to the extent that the entire rehab staff signed a letter asking to get him fired. He was basically forced out. I eventually left, and came to my current job. I swung by the rehab gym and saw his bug sitting in my current boss's office. I kind of froze in shock. I thought he was interviewing for a job there.
I want
So I
turtles.
went to the boss at the time and told her flat out that if he got hired, I was walking out immediately. She got a stunned look on her face, and quickly assured me that he wasn't working there. That was my first time drawing a line in the sand like that. This was about 5-6 years ago. I was the second in charge of our shipping department, making $11 an hour. The head of shipping had a mental breakdown, so I took over while he got help. About 3 weeks after he returned, the company released him because they didn't like him and I could do the job. When they told me they had released him, I asked if there were going to be interviews for the job, or was the job just mine since I was number 2. I was told they were looking, but I would have a chance to interview once that process started. Fast forward about 6 months and I'm still doing this job that pays around $50K a year for $11 an hour. We had some issues with staff turnover and process changes because the warehouse manager thought he knew best and would listen. They then tell me there wouldn't be a shipping manager, just a shipping lead, which would be an hourly position. I ask about a raise, get told my review is in 2 months, so just wait. I wait. 3 months, 4 months. Then one day, after a 14-hour night shift, I get a call from the WM telling me I have to come in right now. When I get there, he unloads on me for things that were beyond my control, and mistakes other people made. We start yelling, and that's when I told him, I make $11 an hour doing this job. Ex-boss told me he got paid $50K a year to do. I don't need this crap. Give me a raise or I won't be back. I then went home and back to sleep. When I go back to work, I'm met by WM and ops manager. They appreciate the hard work I've been doing, and are putting me on a salary starting at $45K since ex-boss was there longer. I negotiated up to $48K. Nice. Please use your new title to look for other work, just in case. They don't sound very competent. For the past few years I've worked at one of the nicer restaurants in my small beach town. I'm one of the only servers who cares about doing a good, and I'm the only one who doesn't take a smoke break every 15 minutes. This past summer a new, very illegal, rule was implemented that if we messed up an order in any way we would be liable to pay for that messed up food. I usually didn't have a problem with mess ups, so I didn't bring up the legality of this matter since I make good money and don't want to start fires in places that don't concern me. That until I rang in a cherry glaze burger instead of a cherry glaze steak, each stylized CGB and CGS in our crappy computer system. I fixed this with the kitchen, but not before they had already started the burger. I told my manager and she just gave me a disappointed and told me that the rules are the rules. I then dived into both federal and state workers' rights code and told her she would never see me again if I found any money out of my tips at the end of the night. Never had a problem fixing an order again. Was working in a restaurant. Already knew I was sick, but our managers were buttholes and I knew if I called in they'd be extremely pissy. Showed up to work around 8 a.m. By 9 a.m. I knew I wasn't gonna last the rest of the day. Manager still made me stay. Around 9:30 I was pre-buzzing my tables and just the sight of half-eaten food pushed me over the edge. Managed to hold my vomit until I got to the dishwashing area, but puked in a trash can immediately after putting my plates down. A co-worker saw me and vouched for me when I went to tell my manager I was leaving for the doctor. He said, even with
I know I have
doctor's
silk
note,
cuts on
if
some
you
kind
leave
of
work today,
pickaxe
you'll be
somewhere,
fired. I
somehow.
said, you have human waste in a kitchen trash can and haven't even done anything about it. It's on camera.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna have to. I'll be right back, guys. I'm gonna have some difficulty.